All right, everybody. I'd like to say thank you so much once again for joining our presentation for job hunting for neurodivergent professionals presented by myself at Atypical Careers. My name is Veronica, and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. Oh my goodness, there we go. So as some of you might know, I think most of you would have probably found me through the Facebook group Neurodivergent Careers and Job Hunting. Some of you may be more familiar with me through my coaching work and things like that. However you found me, I'm so glad you're here. And my goal with Atypical Careers is to really make sure that we are creating career resources and services that are accessible and suitable for neurodivergent minds, because as we all know, there's a lot of career advice out there that doesn't make a lot of sense for us, that doesn't really take into account our unique experiences and our unique challenges as well. So that's really what I'm aiming to do with this series and with Atypical Careers in general. So that's great. Let's move on here. Now, I want to ask you guys a couple of questions before we get started, and I love to see some of your feedback in the comments. The first part, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of opinions here, but I want you to tell us, what are the worst parts of job hunting, in your opinion? All of us are going to have different things. What are the things that you dread the most? What are the things that make you not want to do it? What are the things that are making you feel locked in the place that you are right now? I'm seeing in the comments here, networking is one of them right here. Doing interviews, I'm seeing right here. Doing a lot of work not to have your application looked at. Technical interviews, cover letters with endless admin, getting past the initial interview and moving forward. The lack of direction, lots and lots of applications with no response. There's so much. It's not about what you know, it's who you know. That sounds like a phrase I've heard before, for sure. I'm seeing a lot here, and I hope that you guys are looking in the chats as well and seeing that you're definitely not alone in the feelings that you have towards job hunting. So many neurodivergent people that I've met loathe job hunting for the exact reasons you guys are mentioning in the chat right now. It can be absolutely overwhelming at best and absolutely debilitating at its worst. So I just want to set that that framework there to say that this is something that is very common, and you're not outside of the norm for feeling this way. Now, speaking of that, now I would like you guys to share in the chat, how does job hunting make you feel? Let's use feeling words. Let's use, like, how does it make you feel in your mind, in your body? How does it affect you on a day-to-day basis? Let's see here. I'm seeing phrases like inadequate, overwhelmed, tired, exhausted, depressed, anxious, overwhelmed and exhausted, stuck, stressed, frustrated. The list goes on, and I'm seeing a lot of common threads here, with the fact that, it's just such an overwhelming thing to experience. So that's that right there. The last thing I want to ask you guys, and I have an answer for this, I do have an answer, but I want to see what you guys think first. So what do you think makes an employer want to hire someone? What makes them think, hey, this is the one, this is the person, or like, I feel confident making this decision to invest in this individual? I want to take a moment and hear, what are some of the things that you think? What are some of the opinions that you have? Let's see here. We're seeing the candidate would be willing to do lots of work for not a lot of pay, which, you know what, that's a completely valid take. Companies are definitely trying to get the bang for their buck, and definitely some often at the expense of the individual. We're looking at phrases like having good references, good interview vibe, culture fit, confidence, competence, let's see what else here. Proven work ethic, checking all the boxes, having a good personality, or a personality that aligns with the organization skills and capabilities that fit with the tribe. I know that there's a lot of messages coming in here. Hopefully you guys can see that there are some common threads here, and hopefully you see some reflection in what you've experienced yourself. Now there are many answers to this to this question. There's no one truth, but I am actually going to tell you what my opinion is on what makes an employer want to hire someone, and this is going to carry through as the theme throughout our presentation. So, drum roll, please. The goal is to create a positive experience for the employer. Now, some of you guys are probably taking a moment and being like, oh man, I have to be in charge of the employer's experience. I have to anticipate what they're thinking, what they're saying, and everything like that. Definitely doesn't sound like fun, for sure. And I want to acknowledge that at first. But that being said, I do think that this rings true, and I'll tell you why. How do you get anybody to do anything? Like, we all know as neurodivergent people, especially the ones who struggle with executive dysfunction. And I'm going to get to your point, Catherine, there. Yes, interviews are a two-way street. But the way that you can absolutely improve your chances of creating this positive experience is for you to actually be able to understand what is the employer actually looking for, and trying to translate that into what your actions could be to try and fulfill that. Now, at the same time, yes, interviews are a two-way street. Your employer should be doing the same thing. Are all employers going to do that? No. Like, they're probably not going to do it. That being said, it is up to you to decide if this employer is worth the energy and the time that it takes in order for you to create that positive experience. And hopefully they're going to echo that back. And only when you feel that on the two-way street does that mean that maybe that this is a working relationship that might have potential of blooming. So obviously, there's a lot of layers in this, but this is just one concept that I'd like you to consider as we go through this here. Now, I do see one question here in the chat. How does one create a positive experience with an employer if you haven't been able to reach the interview stage? And that is something that I'm going to cover. I am going to do a quick summary today of resumes and cover letters, interviews, and networking. Very quick before we go into our Q&A, because I want to spend as much time on the Q&A as possible. The first one that I am going to share here is about resumes. And I'd like to present a myth to you here that's on the screen. A good application will land you a job. Now, a lot of us sit there and, we agonize over our resumes. We're thinking, oh my God, we need to make it absolutely perfect in order for us to be able to get that job and everything. Now, what I often find is that, no, you know what? Actually, I'm going to hold on that thought, and I'm actually going to switch over to what my alternative reframe for this is. So, as opposed to a good application will land you a job, here's my alternative. Applications don't get you jobs. They get you interviews. So now, what's the difference? You might be thinking, like, what's the difference? Like, the point is like, I need to talk to them, right? Well, here's the thing. When we are doing our resumes, oftentimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to make it perfect because we equate the quality of our resume with the potential of getting the job. But actually what it does is it gets you the interview. The application has no other function other than to get you in a position to have a face-to-face or a voice-to-voice conversation over the phone or whatever it may be. But that is the only goal of a resume. That means that your resume doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to have a strong message, and it has to very clearly convey your personal brand, so to speak, or who you are, what you offer. And in order to do that, you need to have a huge clarity on who you are. You need to know what you offer and what your brand message is as a professional in order for them to actually understand what it is. Now, I know this is all well and good, talking about it in theory. Let me give you one example. But before we get to that example, because I forgot about this slide, what makes a good resume? Now, I'm going to show you an example of a resume in just a minute that I have developed. Let's see here. What makes a good resume? The first is a clear sense of identity. The second is it's skimmable, easy to read. And as we know, neurodivergent people, we need to have our line breaks. We need to make sure that it's easy to read. And if that's something that we need, then maybe that is something that we could transfer over and this concept into, how can I make my resume easier to read for the recruiter who is going through dozens and dozens of resumes, of course, right? Now, I'm disappointed to hear that, Catherine, that you're not finding this helpful, but I do stick by it because I do have my approach here is unique because I have a background in marketing, as some of you might know. It is from the so basically my approach for having a good resume is making sure that you have a very strong message and you do understand what you're putting forward. Now, let me go on to the third point, intuitive layout, easy to locate information so that, again, this is all trying to create a more positive experience for when they're reading your resume. Containing keywords aligned with the job posting, and that is, of course, very standard knowledge as well. So you do want to make sure that your resume reflects those keywords. Now, let me show you an example of a resume that I've developed. This is my own type of template that I've developed over the years, and I found that it's been very, very helpful. Obviously, my client's name was not Adam West. I did not write a resume for Batman. But that said, I did change all of the information on here so that I could present this in front of you. So as you can see here, the number one thing that I do from the very top heading, we have the name in a very clear bolding. We have the contact information on the side here. And what I have here is also a tagline right under his name in green, arts and administration professional. This is so that when people see your name and they see a tagline next to it, this is very, very similar to LinkedIn. It gives them a one sentence so that they can know who you are in a snap. Think about big brands like McDonald's. McDonald's has the tagline, "I'm loving it." So, you kind of associate that with the brand. This is very similar. What kind of phrasing? How do you want to be recognized as a professional in your resume? This is a very easy way to do it. And the other thing is that it's very easy to tailor it to different jobs. So let's say he was applying to a job within the tech industry for administration. Well, he would just change arts to tech, and that takes a lot less time than redoing your entire resume. This concept also goes on to the next section, which is probably the most important section. I call it my highlights of skills, because it actually highlights the 4 things that you want the reader to actually remember about you, if they remember nothing else from your resume. Because chances are the recruiter is not going to memorize your resume. They're not going to leave being like, "Oh man, I can't believe that they did this tiny detail in the body of the resume." But if they leave remembering nothing else about you, you want them to remember those top 4 things. So you can see at the top here, we've put highly experienced with the number of years of experience they said, people focused, detail oriented. These were the things that we decided would make things, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. These are the 4 things that we want to align with this person's brand. So this is, so that is kind of the main approach that I like to take. Otherwise, it is very clean. It is very easy to skim. It is well organized, and things like that. Now, I can't go through absolutely every detail in the scope of this Q&A. However, I did want to show you what it looked like, and I'll very quickly show you a cover letter as well. This one is from a different client who was CPG marketing specialist. Now, what I recommend here, because and I'm going to go over this a little bit later, but as neurodivergent people, our energy is very limited. We don't have exponential amounts of energy to spend on applying to every single job or changing our resume every single time. So what we want to do is we want to get really strategic. For the previous one, I'm going to go back to the resume for a second. If you only changed the tagline underneath the main name and some of the icons or the details in the highlights of skills, that would probably be enough to tailor your resume to another job that is slightly different from the original intended, right? So that is ultimately saving you time if you have a template that allows you to do small tweaks as opposed to rewriting the whole thing. For this resume as well, what I did was, because she was exclusively looking for marketing, we wrote a marketing resume here, a marketing cover letter here. And then we put in fields that we could swap information out of. So like the job position title, the employer name, and all that kind of stuff. But what I typically like to do is, because if you are focusing on a specific type of job, just like, Shauna was looking for a marketing position, then the cover letter really doesn't need to change that much. And the only section that I would say that you would need to edit is maybe having like 1 or 2 lines where you can update something specific about that employer. Like, I really like how XYZ company's values align with my professional values. That's one hack that I like to use, because that oftentimes when you are applying for a job, you look up their values. At least one of them will usually align with your professional values, at least to a degree, and you can kind of use that as like a foot in the door to kind of be like, oh, we share these values, let's talk about it, and stuff like that. And they usually like hearing that. So I'm going to give this a rest here. Let me look at the comments very quickly. Pardon me, I'm so sorry. Should we modify a little bit for each application? Yes, I just explained that a little bit. I hope that I answered that. Do you have advice for resumes properly formatted for ATS? Yes, you can absolutely create an ATS-friendly version as well. Now, the tricky thing about ATS is that, obviously ATS resumes don't look good. They are very functional and very word processing and not as well designed. That being said, the flip side is the well-designed ones don't perform as well in ATS. Sometimes it is helpful to have a version of both, so that in the event that you are uploading to an ATS and you have that version of it, like the Microsoft Word version or a Google Docs version or something like that, you can use it for that function. But I do recommend having a designed version that is easily readable by humans, because chances are, if you are going to a company that you want to work with, that you want to have human connection with, hopefully their hiring process will have a human involved at some point, and you want to be able to make an impression on that, because ultimately the ATS doesn't make the final decision. Well, I mean, it does filter you out at the beginning, so I guess I shouldn't say that. But ultimately, the human makes the final decision based off their impressions of you. So I hope that answers that there. Moving on to interviews, because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. Interviews are all about giving the right answers, and this is something. This is a sentiment that I hear a lot from my clients here. They're all like, "What's the right thing to say? What's the correct response?" And it almost becomes a game of trying to anticipate what the interviewer wants to hear. Now, this is not necessarily there's nothing wrong with that, but that being said, it does put you at a disadvantage in the sense that it locks you into a corner of, oh, I have to say what I think they want to say, as opposed to just giving a solid answer and, having faith in the fact that, that solid answer will carry you through. Because ultimately, it's very easy to get caught up in the perfectionist side of things and trying to make sure you get everything right and you tick off all the boxes. But that is not what, building relationships and, building those relationships, yes, is all about. So let me reframe a little bit here. When you both leave the meeting feeling good, that is a sign of a successful interview. Now, how does that work? There are a few tips that you could that I have that might be helpful, and hopefully we'll cover more during the Q&A. But the first thing that I recommend when you're preparing for interviews is to, for lack of a better word, become your own special interest. Think about the special interest that you have and how well you know it, and the rabbit hole that you went down trying to figure out all the details. I want you to hopefully know yourself at that level, know your strengths, your challenges, your goals, what motivates you in the workplace. Practice talking about yourself, so hopefully that is a helpful thing. If you know yourself well enough, then it's going to become a lot easier when you're put on the spot to answer a question, and you're going to be able to draw from that knowledge base a lot better. And this is something that I practice constantly with my clients in our coaching sessions and stuff. 2, consider their priorities. What would you want to know if you were in the interviewer's position? Now, I recognize that this requires some anticipation of what the employer wants. And I know that's not always what people want to hear, because, we always talk about like how masking is exhausting and how masking can be overwhelming. That being said, I do think that if we're going to play this game, and let's be real, the job hunting thing is a game. It is a series of, obstacles, so to speak, for lack of a better term, that we need to jump through in order to get to the final destination. That means that not everything is going to be on our terms. We already know that. We're neurodivergent. Not everything is going to be on our own terms. But so we need to find out, okay, what is a reasonable amount of energy and effort to expend on this? So if you think that you have a good chance at interviewing at this organization, and that it presents a lot of potential, they're throwing back all the good vibes and putting in as much effort as you are on your end, then maybe it is worth the effort to try and anticipate their needs and try to prepare and talk just for that half hour or an hour of an interview and everything like that. So I'd be interested to hear what people think about that, because that is something that I often have to talk through with my clients to try and get them to a place where they can feel comfortable with it. And everybody's comfort level is different, so it's difficult to kind of tailor it to each individual person in a group like this, but I hope that that is a helpful tip. The third thing I'm going to say, and this you can take or leave this, but I would want to say, making a memory. And this is just to help associate you as an individual with a positive memory with the individual if you are doing it, if you're doing an interview. So try to create 1 or 2 small, unique interactions with your interviewer. It doesn't have to be anything high stakes. It could literally be something like giving them a compliment or finding a common interest. Oh my gosh, like, look at that tie. I have one that's very similar at home. Or, hey, like, I hope you didn't get caught in traffic today, or something like that. I know that sometimes it feels like, we're kind of putting up a front and saying all these things, but honestly, like, if you're trying to build a relationship and rapport with someone else, you need to find common ground. And the best way to do that is to try and initiate that out of good faith. So there is that. So let's move on to the next. We're going to quickly go over networking as well, and then I want to get to questions. Networking is often referred to as the only way to get jobs, especially nowadays. They say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. They've been saying that for decades. It's annoying, but we all deal with it. But what is the reframe we can take from this? The best way to get a job is to play to your unique strengths. It's not about what works for everybody else. Just because it works for everybody else doesn't mean it has to work for you. And just because, everybody else is doing one thing does not mean that you're doing it wrong by doing it a different way. So this comes all back to knowing yourself really well, understanding your strengths, your limitations, all of that stuff, and playing to it. So here's some networking advice that I've got for you. Number 1, find a medium that suits you. So for example, don't force yourself to go to large scale in-person events if you know you won't perform well. And extending from that, don't force yourself into those large scale events right away if you're feeling, not sure about it, and if you're worried about how you're going to be able to handle yourself. Start with small tangible goals that you have like a better chance of achieving. And like, for example, try a smaller, more intimate event where there is less risk, especially if something goes awry or something like that. Make sure you have an exit strategy as needed. Connect with people online. Networking on LinkedIn is a whole other beast, but that might be another way to do it as well. Or consider just if you're better, for example, at submitting resumes, if you've gotten, like, in theory, really good at writing resumes and cover letters, maybe that's the best way for you to focus your effort there. If it makes more sense than dividing your time 50-50 between the two, because you have a higher success rate with one than the other. There is no right or wrong way to do job hunting. Well, I mean, there are some off-limit things, but don't be constricted by what people say you should be doing. The last point that I'm going to make is ration your energy. And I mentioned this before. You need to be strategic with your approach, because honestly, we as neurodivergent people, and by extension anybody who experiences disabilities and stuff like that, there's just not enough time in the day, there's not enough energy in a day, all that kind of stuff. And it's so important to actually take some time to really think strategically about what you want, where you want to end up, all of that, and then come up with a strategy so that you can ration your energy and be really smart about how you spend it so that you have the highest chance of getting a return. So that is something that I would like to leave with you there. Okay, so we've heard me ramble on for a little while. I would like to spend the rest of our time together here on Q&A. Now, I do have some pre-submitted questions. If you have some questions that you would like to ask on the fly in the chat, I will try my best to answer as many as possible. That being said, not a guarantee that I'm going to be able to answer all of them. There are quite a few people in this call. That being said, I will do my best, so let's get going. I have my first question here. Like many other neurodivergents, I am so tired of being told that an employer is inclusive and accommodating only to be let down over and over. How can I be sure that a company is neurodivergent friendly before accepting the position? Okay, this is a question I get a lot, because there is an assumption that the opposite of the standard company is a neurodivergent friendly company or a disability inclusive company, or somebody, you're either one or the other. That in reality is not true. It can be kind of blurred. Some people can be better at some accessibility aspects than others. Some people can be good at one thing than another. I'm sorry, I meant company, not people. So it can be very challenging to figure out, hey, is this good for me? Is this right for me? So I recommend that we reframe this question a little bit here. Instead of looking for a neurodivergent friendly company, instead think about, what do you need specifically as an individual? Not even like obviously as a neurodivergent individual, but that's just one part of your identity. Think about all parts of your identity. What do you need in order to succeed? And then find ways to find out whether this employer will be able to meet those needs or support you with those needs, or will they be, are they willing to do those kinds of things? So that would often come down to, especially if you're in an interview, knowing what kind of questions to ask and knowing, what kind of information do you want to leave with? So it's not about, what are the right questions to ask, Veronica? It's more about, what information do I want to get out of them, and reverse engineering those that information to figure out what kind of question could I ask them in order to gain that information. So in the event that, let's say that for sure that you are applying for a job in an office, but you cannot work in an open concept space, and you get overwhelmed with sensory issues like the fluorescent lights and the sounds and people coming by and all that kind of stuff. So maybe, if you know for sure right off the bat that you are going to need a space that is, private, where you can focus, where you can put your headphones on and stuff like that. Reverse engineer those needs and try and figure out, how can I ask a question that would give me insight as to what they have done or what they will do for me. So one example is you could ask the question, how have you supported your employees who have required like additional supports or accommodations in the past? That's not asking them, do you do that, like straight up, but it is asking them to refer to previous examples so that they can speak to that. And that is more likely to give you a more, authentic answer there. So I hope that is helpful. Let's move on to the next one here. I have been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and now I'm ready to work outside of home. Yet working on my resume seems like an insurmountable task, and I'm a writer. Like, any tips, Veronica? How does the cobbler make herself a pair of shoes? I totally get that, because I was a writer as well, and often the hardest thing to write about is ourselves, because it requires us to get really nitty-gritty and granular about what we have achieved, and often that can feel really uncomfortable, and that can be like, anyway, yeah, uncomfortable. It's not really the most fun thing to do. So with that said, again, I'm going to say that this comes back to knowing yourself and like really doing some deep exploration as to what your skills are, what your strengths are, and things like that. And based off of that and cross-referencing that with the type of work that you're trying to get into, which I don't know what that work is, you try and figure out, okay, what are the 3 or 4 top qualifiers or the top experiences or the top skills that I have that would make me best qualified for this role? That if somebody saw these 4 things next to my name, they would say, I need to call that person. And remember, resumes are not to get you the job, it's to get you an interview, because that's how you start to influence people. So if you manage to get an interview and just pique their interest just enough to get them to call you, that means that the resume worked. And for this specific question, I actually did have an example I wanted to show, because this is one of my favorite resumes that I've made over the years. I was working with somebody, we'll call her Elena, and all this information has changed, but she was a wonderful individual who had a lot of blogging experience, her personal blog, as well as volunteer and unpaid work experience. But she didn't have enough experience in one role in order to really display how she would be a good fit for a communications position. So I don't know if I can zoom in on this. I hope I can. I might not be able to, I apologize. But if you can see, so on the left, we have a very similar format to what we saw with the previous resume, with the 4 highlights of skills at the top. But what I really want to bring forward is the second page, where we further drill down into the highlights of skills. And here, what we've done is we've actually isolated the 5 skills that we thought would be the most marketable and the most applicable to the types of jobs that she was applying for. And what we did was, instead of organizing it by experience, we organized it by skill and then listed the experience underneath each skill. And I'm very happy to say that my client here was actually successful in finding her first communications role very soon after she started applying with this. So this is just another way to reimagine how a resume is. Often we get so caught up in what is a resume supposed to look like, that we forget that a resume is actually just a document to present and advertise ourselves. And we can technically format it any way we want, as long as it conveys the information that the individual is looking for. So I hope that that example is helpful there. Let's see here. Now I do see a question in, I'm just checking the chat for questions here. How have you supported your employees who have needed accommodations in the past? Oh, here. So just to confirm, Ophelia, I think I said, how have you supported your employees who have needed accommodations and supports in the past? I think you got most of it. Yeah, it's right there. Going on to the next question here. Let me read it out. I did not find out the full extent of my mental health struggles and neurodiversity until my early 30s. As a result, I have several gaps on my resume due to multiple terminations and struggling to hold down a job. How do I address this on applications and in interviews? Great question. Now, I relate because I was also diagnosed with my ADHD since I was 30. I mean, neurodiversity has always been in my life. I've had for loved ones who have been neurodivergent, but I never really realized how it affected my life until I got that diagnosis, and it made me really reframe a lot of things that happened to me earlier in my career, and that includes constant burnout and constant job hopping. So I also had many terminations and many gaps on my resume as well. There are different ways to do it. I think the best way for me to explain it is, okay, oftentimes these gaps occur because we are organizing our resumes chronologically, and we are so worried about, like, oh my gosh, what if they notice the gap between the dates? Now, you could put it that way and just hope that they're okay with the gaps. Sometimes they won't comment on it. If they do comment on it, it's recommended that you have something that you can say about it. And I don't know what the details are about your previous gaps, but for me, I would take it case by case. So for one of them, if I left, if I separated with an employer, I would say something like, unfortunately, like, it wasn't a good fit, and we mutually decided to separate, or something. If that is true, for example, sometimes you can just be honest and say, unfortunately, like, it wasn't a good fit, and, I'm very committed to finding a place where I can properly contribute my skills and, really gain satisfaction in my work, like whatever, like, something like that. There is no exact right or wrong way. It's going to be dependent on the individual, which I know is probably not exactly what you want to hear. You probably want to hear a magic answer, but that is it. But the only other thing that I will mention, and maybe I'll go back a couple of slides to explain, but remember here, the skills-based resume, as you can see, there's no real way to kind of like see if you've had gaps in your resume by the way we formatted it on the second page, because it's all based on skills. So maybe if you're concerned about that and you have the capacity and the spoons or the energy to do it, maybe a skills-based resume format might help you cover up some of those gaps if they're really, really glaring to you and you're really concerned about addressing them. So that is just one other option that you could definitely look into there. So I hope that's helpful. Let me bring on the next question here. There are significant needs in my current life that require me to work from home. I have been working from home for the last 9 years and made enough for half my family's needs doing so. Now I am unemployed due to unfair circumstances. I'm having a very hard time finding something that pays what I was making, doing similar things or using my skills that doesn't require a degree. Although I'm in school to get a degree, how would you market someone like me with plenty of experience and plenty of skills in today's market for a work from home position? For sure. And I'm so sorry that you find yourself unemployed under unfair circumstances. Obviously, I don't know your situation, but I do know what it feels like to be in that boat. And I'm sure a lot of people in this call and people who are watching later when they're doing the recording are going to really resonate with that. Now, obviously, work from home is a huge topic right now, not just in the neurodivergent space, although especially in the neurodivergent space, because, so many of us would benefit so much from, having the support of being able to work flexibly partially from home in a hybrid situation or fully from home or things like that. Unfortunately, that's made work from home very, very in demand, and it's made it very challenging to find a legitimate one. So although I don't have a lot of advice in terms of how to find and land improve your chance of getting a work from home position, other than doing your best to try and put forward applications that reflect your qualities and your skills, which obviously you have a lot of. I would ask you the questions, at what point in the job hunting stage are you getting stuck in? Are you not getting replies to your applications? Wait, even one step further, are you not finding work from home jobs in your space? Like, are you not able to find them, that jobs that fulfill your requirements? Two, are you not getting responses to your resume or cover letter? Because if that's the case, then maybe the focus should be on revamping your cover letter or resume in a way or in some way. If it's the interview, then the question is how can we improve your interview skills? Or even so, like, how can we even reframe the way that you are approaching interviews so that hopefully we can improve your chances of that? So I think the number one thing that you need to do is really look at where you're finding a block in the process, and then narrow down what can you do to try and get past that block and take it one step at a time. So I wish you all the best, and I hope that you can find something in a work from home position, especially so that you can support your family and have the stability that you need. All right. Let's keep it going here. We have about 15 more minutes. I'd like to get through as many of these as I can. I keep hearing that networking is the only way to get jobs nowadays, which is stressing me out so much because networking events are my worst nightmare. I get so overstimulated and I never know if I'm coming off as a normal human, and I end up feeling horrible and depressed because I can't do this simple thing everyone is supposed to be able to do. How can I get a job if I can't network? Shout out in the comments if you feel this so hard, because it is it's so relatable. And it's so frustrating when everybody in the world is telling you this is the only way to do it. Like, you're wasting your time if you're doing anything else. It's kind of like those influencers online who are saying stuff like, oh, I can, if you use my method, then you can like lose weight in 30 days, or you can like build a $100,000 business in like a month or something like that. But there is no one way that works for everyone. That's just a fact, because we're all so different. Even within the neurodivergent community, we're all so different. We all have different needs. It doesn't make sense for only one method to work for every human who's seeking employment on the earth. So I want you to really, first off, approach it like that and realize and give yourself some grace. Just because you're not good at the traditional type of networking or the networking that they're expecting you to do doesn't mean that you're at a loss and that it's hopeless. Okay, so I just want to say that. Now let's address what you are dealing with. You feel like you get overstimulated. You feel like you are either masking badly. I don't know if you can mask badly, but you are not masking in the way that you want to mask, or, you're not feeling good because you're masking, and you end up feeling horrible and depressed and all of this kind of stuff. So this is very relatable. I want you to be forgiving to yourself and say, how can I set myself up for success? I'm going to use an example of people going to university or college. Oftentimes when we go to college and we're told you need to take a full course load every single semester in order to graduate on time. On time is kind of like the standard that we've put together for the students here to kind of aim for. Now, does that mean that if you take extra time throughout the year and take a lighter course load, does that mean that your graduation is any less significant? Absolutely not. You are taking the time to do things your way, and you are taking the time to make sure that you are setting reasonable goals along the way so that you can actually succeed. Now, what happens if you do try to take a full course load, but you're not confident you can do it, and you get overwhelmed and you fail? Well, you're going to feel horrible about that. And then it's going to be way harder to pick yourself up afterwards and try to do it again. But what if you started with a reduced course load, and then you find out, hey, I can actually do this. I'm doing fine. Maybe I'll take one more course. Maybe I'll take 2 more courses this semester. Test it out. Test out the water. See how it's going. It's a lot easier to work your way up from small successes than to reach for like a really high goal and then fail and then have to pick yourself back up and do that. So what I recommend that you do when it comes to networking, if you are determined to try networking and make it work, start small. ask yourself, what are the things that are challenging for you? Overstimulation, for example. What if there is a networking event in an environment like a small cafe or something like that? I don't know what would work for you, that would actually address that and give you a better chance of succeeding in that environment. Maybe it's networking on LinkedIn, which maybe one of these days I should do a presentation on because I keep talking about it. But yeah, so like really acknowledging these individual things that you're struggling with, and then coming up with ways to accommodate that, and taking smaller steps will probably help you gain the momentum that you need in order to find work. And if you feel like networking is not your thing, focus your energy on something that does work for you. If you have a higher success rate with just applying to jobs, or like, networking online on social media or something like that, lean into that and try and do what works for you. Ultimately, like, don't feel bad if you can't network. It's not the end of the world. Yes, for some people it is the key, but for others it's not. And that there's nothing wrong with that. Great. I see a question in the comments, and I'm going to switch over to that real quick. So the question is, how do you get past the initial application process when it forces you to enter a specific start and end date for each job, thus exposing the gaps in your work history? And what if they require you to provide contact information for all your employers who terminated you? I hope I'm not reading too far into this, but I really feel like, you're feeling very self-conscious and concerned about any potential questions you might get about this, because those questions haven't happened yet. So let me say this first. Okay, yes, you have gaps in your resume. That is a fact. That does not make you a bad person, but it does present some challenges when it comes to finding employment. That's what it is, baseline. Now, when you're now I do recommend that you enter the dates as as they did appear in your work history. Now, you could fudge the dates a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to officially recommend that you fudge the dates, but you take that on your own time, because ultimately, the way that I see it is, if there's like a 3-month difference between like the real amount of time that you spent at your previous job and the 3-month, anyway, I'm not phrasing this very well, but if there's only like a little bit of time in between and they decide not to hire you for that, even though it has nothing to do with your capabilities of doing the job, that's kind of silly, right? Like, objectively, that's kind of silly. Now, what we're afraid of is not how silly it is, but how it will affect us moving forward. We're afraid of losing that chance and that opportunity. So I just want to acknowledge that there. And the other thing I want to say is that it's not guaranteed they're going to call you out on your on the gaps in your resume, but we're all so like self-conscious about it, and we're so afraid of like having to answer it, that we just kind of like get overwhelmed about it. Applying to jobs online, yes. So yeah, so I'm assuming from your follow-up here that you're really looking at like, filling out those forms online, especially for the ATS, and you're concerned about how it's going to be showing up in the form when it's being submitted there. And what if they require you to provide contact information for all the previous employers who terminated you? I haven't actually run into that personally, asking you to provide all your contact information. Most commonly, they will ask you for references, and you would be able to provide those references, and you would be able to choose those references there. Now, that being said, in the event that they did ask you for literally all the contacts there, it is up to you to decide which ones you put forward. If they asked you, like, can you please provide like all the contact information for the employers you had for the last 5 years? What if you just provided the ones that you wanted and then left it in their field to be like, oh, is this like, if they feel like that's not enough, they'll come back to you and say, hey, where are the rest of them? But if they don't respond to that, and chances are they probably won't, because they already have the information that they need from the references that you submitted, then it might end up being a non-issue. So I understand the urge to kind of ruminate and worry about like these scenarios that haven't happened yet and like the what if scenarios. But if you feel like that ruminating on those things are holding you back from, getting those applications out there and putting yourself out there and everything, then I encourage you to really reframe it and be like, maybe this is not a now problem. Maybe this is a later problem. And, have faith in your ability to address the later problem. And I hope that's helpful. I obviously don't know all the details about your situation, but I'm hoping that that provides some insight there. All right, moving on to the next question here. Let's see. Oh, here's a classic. Should I tell the employer that I'm autistic? And when should I disclose? This is, again, very common, and it doesn't have to be autistic. It could be anything under the neurodivergent umbrella. Should I disclose my diagnosis to my employer? This can be complicated. Let me start with the job interview process, because this is usually where it starts. People wonder, is it better for me to be upfront and honest about my diagnosis in advance with the employer, so that there are no surprises down the road? And the idea is that if I tell my employer before I'm hired that I'm autistic, I have ADHD, whatever it is, then maybe like they'll have less grounds to penalize me for things down the road. Now, who's to say, right? It really depends on the individual there. There's also the idea that, in an interview, you can request for accommodations as well. But in order to do that, you wonder, do you need to disclose your diagnosis? Now, obviously, again, no right or wrong way, but let me tell you what my opinion is. If you are applying for a job, you are not applying because of your status as a neurodivergent person. You are applying because you have the skills and the knowledge, ideally, or you have the know-how or the ability to do the job. That is literally all the employer needs to be concerned about. Can you do the job? Now, your autism or your ADHD or your neurodivergence in general might affect that on some degree. But when they're interviewing you, I personally don't believe that they need to know your diagnosis, because they should be focusing on what your skills are and everything like that. Now, later, when you are hired, during the hiring process, you still have the choice. Like it's up to you. You could never disclose your diagnosis to your employer. Sometimes that's helpful for people. Sometimes it's not helpful, and they actually want to disclose. But ultimately, my opinion is that when it comes to the job hunting process, you don't need to disclose, because that shouldn't be relevant. And ultimately, your ADHD and your autism and your neurodivergence should not technically impact your ability to do the work. It might impact the conditions under which you might be able to do the work. Like, for example, if you need certain accommodations, if you need a quiet location to do the work, if you need flexibility in hours, but that does not impact your ability to do the work. It just means that you would need certain conditions and certain supports in order to do your best work. So I hope that's helpful with that. And I think we're almost out of time. I think I'm going to take one more question before I wrap up here, because I just want to squeeze one more in. My current job is so toxic, and by the time I get home, I can barely feed myself, much less find the time and energy to job hunt. I feel so trapped. How do I get out of this situation? And I feel that on a very deep level. I'm so sorry that you're feeling that. You have a unique situation to yourself. The questions I would ask you if we were talking together is, what basic needs do you currently have that are not being met? And that is things like, are you getting enough sleep? Do you have enough to eat? Are you well hydrated? Do you have a safe environment where you can like decompress and regulate at home or elsewhere? What are your support systems like? And when I say support system, it could be loved ones who you can talk to and lean on. It could be a therapist or a doctor. It could be, you know, even an online resource like the Facebook group that we all have and everything. You know, really knowing what you have to lean on and then coming up with a way to try and prioritize your well-being and your basic needs first. Because here's the thing, if you try to job hunt without having your basic needs met, you are setting yourself up for burnout. There's literally like no point in doing that because you are going to crash and burn. So what you need to do is take care of yourself first, make sure you fill up your cup, have the energy to do that, and then find a way to start, you know, doing baby steps. Like, you know, maybe you even submitting one application a week is better than nothing. Again, you know, when you get to the point where you can meet your basic needs and you can start investing a little bit of time each week doing this and setting up those goals that are attainable, then you can decide, how can I be strategic about this? How can I ration my energy so that I can get the most out of the effort that I put in here? So again, sorry, there's no straightforward situation. If there was a way for us to talk one-on-one, I would ask you more about those prompts, but I hope that gives you a start. All right, so let's see here. We are at the end of our time, so I just wanted to wrap up and say thank you so much. If you have not joined our Facebook group yet, I do recommend that you join. This is a little bit outdated. It says it's 44,000 members. We're actually at 75,000 members now, which is crazy, but it does mean that it's a very active, very welcoming group. At least we try our best to be. So I'm gonna ask my friend Ruby to actually drop the link to the Facebook group into the chat in case you would like to join and utilize that free resource there. So that should be coming in a minute. The next thing I would like to share is my free training video called Build a Sustainable Work Life and Break the Neurodivergent Burnout Cycle, where I take you through, it's a 1-hour video, webinar style, just like I'm doing right now. And it has a bunch of reflections and activities for you to do so that you can really understand who you are as a professional, your professional identity on a really deep level. And then from there, start to develop a neurodivergent friendly career strategy so that you can start meeting the goals that you have for your work life and by extension, your personal life, because that's what your work life is supposed to do, is support the life that you want to live. So I'm going to ask my friend Ruby to also link the training link in there. Oh, she's already put it in there, the training sign up link. So feel free to check that out as well. I will warn you that this training video is going to be phased out in the next several months. It's probably going to be up for the next like 3 or 4 months. So definitely check it out before then. And yeah, so I hope you find value out of that. The last thing I want to say is thank you. And, you know, I really enjoy putting together these office hours presentations. I really hope that you found value in it. And I really hope that you found value in it and you've maybe learned something that you didn't know before. I have recorded this, so we will be sharing the recording later on. So keep an eye out on your inbox for that. And lastly, I'm going to ask my friend Ruby to share a link to our Buy Me a Coffee page, where we have, where if you would like to support the work that Atypical Careers is doing, creating neurodivergent friendly career content and resources, so that we can all succeed and thrive in our work lives. You know, even kicking us $5 would go a really long way so that we can continue to support ourselves while we are doing this this project. So thank you once again for your attendance. I really appreciate all of your input and your questions and everything. Yeah, I hope to see you all online. Thank you, take care, and have a great day.